I felt very lucky when I first went out to Los Angeles because this film Logan's Run came up very early on, and I was screen tested.
When Logan's Run hit theaters in 1976, audiences were dazzled by the futuristic sets and flashy effects, but nothing grabbed attention quite like Jenny Agutter. Behind those iconic scenes, though, was a wardrobe nightmare she never escaped. Her skimpy, futuristic costume might have looked bold on screen, but off-camera it was a disaster, slipping and betraying her at the worst possible times. What was meant to showcase beauty only left her humiliated, and Jenny never hid how much she despised it. So here's the real question. Was that daring design futuristic brilliance, or just a wardrobe failure that tormented its star? Let's pull back the curtain and find out. What is Logan's Run really about? When Logan's Run hit theaters in 1976, it wasn't just another sci-fi flick. It was a bold vision of the future, wrapped in neon lights, wild special effects, and a story that dared to ask, what if youth wasn't just a phase of life but a death sentence? Directed by Michael Anderson and starring Michael York, Jenny Agutter, Richard Jordan, Roscoe Lee Brown, Farrah Fawcett, and Peter Ustinov, the film pulled audiences into a glittering utopia that quickly revealed itself as a nightmare. In this world, everything seemed perfect until you turned 30. Then it was off to Carousel, where citizens were promised renewal but were really walking straight into their own execution. At the center of it all was Logan 5, played by Michael York, a sandman whose job was to hunt down runners who tried to escape their fate. Logan was loyal to the system until the system turned on him. Suddenly, the hunter became the hunted, and his journey alongside Jenny Agutter's Jessica transformed the film into a thrilling chase for survival and truth. But the road to Logan's Run wasn't smooth. MGM's attempts to bring the 1967 novel to life had been stuck in development hell for years. Early drafts clashed over tone, with some wanting symbolism and social commentary, while others wanted pure sci-fi spectacle. Even George Pal, the producer who dreamed of adapting it in the late 60s, walked away when delays and budget battles threatened to sink the project. The rights bounced around, deals almost collapsed, and ideas kept shifting. It wasn't until producer Saul David took over in 1974 that the film finally gained momentum. Screenwriter David Zelag Goodman gave the story a major overhaul, raising the last day age from 21 to 30. Why? Because it widened the casting pool, allowing more established actors like York and Agutter to fit the roles. He also introduced the now iconic idea of Carousel, a dazzling yet chilling ritual that turned mass death into entertainment. Casting had its own drama. William Devane was originally set to play one of the Sandmen, but when Alfred Hitchcock came calling for family plot, he bailed. In stepped Richard Jordan, who brought an edge to the relentless Francis, the Sandman who refused to let Logan escape. Meanwhile, Peter Ustinov was tapped as the last man alive living among ruins, and Farrah Fawcett, though her part was small, was given star billing thanks to her skyrocketing fame on TV. Visually, the film was groundbreaking. From its use of holograms and wide-angle lenses to the ambitious effects behind Carousel, Logan's Run pushed the boundaries of what sci-fi could look like in the 70s, and Hollywood noticed. The film walked away with a Special Academy Award for visual effects and 6 Saturn Awards, including Best Science Fiction Film. But perhaps what makes Logan's Run so unforgettable isn't just the awards or even the world building. It's the way it captured the cultural mood of the time. Youth worship, government control, and the fear of what lies beyond the safety of a so-called utopia. Beneath the dazzling effects and action-packed chase scenes, the film was really asking, what would you do if society demanded your death just as you were starting to live? And at the center of that haunting question stood Jessica 6. Her role wasn't just a love interest or sidekick. She was the emotional compass of the story, the one who made audiences believe in life beyond the dome. But how did Jenny Agutter land the role that would define her career? How Jenny Agutter landed her role as Jessica 6. Before Jenny Agutter became the unforgettable Jessica 6 in Logan's Run, she was already a familiar face. Born in Taunton, Somerset in 1952, Jenny's childhood was anything but ordinary. With a father who worked as a British Army officer and an entertainment organizer, her early years took her far from home, living in places like Cyprus and Malaysia before she ever found her footing on stage or screen. Fate stepped in when she was discovered at Elmhurst Ballet School. A casting agent spotted her, and while she didn't land the part he had in mind, he passed her name along. That stroke of luck sent her into the world of film with East of Sudan in 1964. From there, she worked her way steadily into Britain's living rooms. Television audiences first knew her as Kirsty in The Newcomers, where she appeared during school holidays. But it was The Railway Children that really stamped her name into public memory, first on television, then in Lionel Jeffries' 1970 film. Jenny's youthful charm made her the perfect Roberta, though that same innocence would later make the leap into far more daring roles all the more striking. Her transition came fast. By the late 1960s, she was already taking on darker, more complex characters, like in the thriller I Start Counting. And when she starred as Fritha in The Snow Goose, she didn't just win hearts, she won an Emmy. But it was Nicholas Roeg's Walkabout that became a turning point. She'd first auditioned for the role in 1967, but the film was delayed, meaning she was 16 when production finally began. Suddenly, she was no longer the little girl from The Railway Children. She was a young woman pushed into adult territory, including nude scenes that shocked her at the time. Jenny would later admit she was stunned by the film's explicitness, yet she never let it overshadow her respect for the craft or for Roeg himself. By the time she moved to Hollywood at 21, Jenny Agutter was ready to reinvent herself. Gone was the English child star. In her place stood a striking young actress capable of blending vulnerability with strength. The 1970s were hers to conquer. She appeared in The Eagle Has Landed, Equus, a role that earned her a BAFTA for Best Supporting Actress and an American Werewolf in London. But it was Logan's Run that positioned her in the limelight like never before. As Jessica 6, Jenny embodied both rebellion and humanity in a world built on cold perfection. Her casting was no accident. Goodman's decision to raise the film's last day age from 21 to 30 opened the door for her, and Hollywood couldn't have asked for a better fit. On screen, she became the heart of the film, grounding Michael York's Logan with compassion and fire. Off-screen, however, her costumes told a different story, daring, futuristic, and often nightmarish to wear. But what made Jenny stand out wasn't just her beauty or talent, but the direction of her career. From innocent child star to fearless adult actress, she bulleted a career on roles that demanded both emotional depth and physical vulnerability. She once remarked that the innocence of her early performances, paired with the nudity and provocative costumes of films like Logan's Run, Equus, and An American Werewolf in London, created what she called perfect fantasy fodder. So how did Jenny Agutter land the role of Jessica 6? By being more than just a pretty face. She had already walked the line between innocence and provocation, had taken risks few actresses her age would dare, and carried with her the credibility of both critical acclaim and audience love. Jessica 6 wasn't just handed to her. It was the natural culmination of a career that had been building toward that moment all along. And once she stepped into Jessica's world, the challenges didn't stop there. If getting the role had been the result of years of hard work, bringing the futuristic story to life was another battle entirely. Behind-the-scenes challenges of Logan's Run. When MGM set out to make Logan's Run, they weren't just shooting a sci-fi adventure. They were taking on one of the most ambitious, back-breaking projects Hollywood had attempted in years. On the surface, the film was about life 300 years in the future. But behind the cameras, it was a battle to invent a believable world from scratch. Everything had to be designed fresh for the 23rd century. The buildings, the food, the laws, the clothes, the transport, the way people loved, and even the way they died. Nothing could look borrowed from the present. Nothing could feel dated. And that level of detail meant stress, sleepless nights, and a production team working at the very edge of what was possible in the mid-1970s. The story they were trying to bring to life was daring. In the futuristic utopia of Logan's Run, everything looks perfect. Endless pleasure, no responsibilities, and a society built on indulgence. But like all utopias that look too good to be true, there's always a catch. In this utopia, however, nobody lives beyond 30. On your last day, you step into carousel, a ritual promising renewal. But really, it's nothing more than a dazzling death sentence. Citizens cheer as friends and family are incinerated before their eyes, never questioning the system. At the center of this chilling paradise is Logan 5, played by Michael York, a Sandman tasked with hunting down anyone who dares to run from carousel. Loyal at first, Logan soon discovers whispers of a sanctuary, a place where escapees might live free. And when his own time begins running out, Logan suddenly finds himself on the other side of the chase, running for his life with Jessica 6, brought to life by Jenny Agutter, by his side. On paper, it sounded like a thrilling mix of spectacle and social commentary. But turning William F. Nolan and George Clayton Johnson's 1967 novel into a blockbuster meant reimagining almost every detail of human life in the future. That pressure was enormous. The filmmakers had to ask questions about everything. What do people eat in the 23rd century? What do they wear? How do they move through their cities? How do they spend their time? Even basic things like jewelry, etiquette, and manners were reinvented to give audiences a world that felt complete. The vision they created was equal parts seductive and unsettling. Citizens lived inside massive domed cities, sealed away from the outside world. The climate was a constant 75 degrees, so heavy clothes weren't needed. Instead, women floated through the city in sheer flowing garments, while men wore tunics and stretch pants. The costumes screamed freedom and sensuality, echoing the liberation of the 1970s, but they also reflected the shallowness of a society that prized pleasure over purpose. The only uniform look belonged to the Sandmen, those black-clad enforcers who executed runners to the cheers of the crowd. And this utopia had rules far stranger than fashion. Families no longer existed. Babies were conceived artificially, incubated by machines, and raised without parents. Nobody had a last name. Nobody had uncles or cousins. When a child was brought into the world, a 30-year-old was eliminated to maintain balance. Zero population growth had been achieved, but at the cost of love, family, and any sense of legacy. Meals were strictly vegetarian. Alcohol was gone, but drugs were everywhere, sold in pill or vapor form, fueling hallucinatory experiences at private parties or in specialized shops. Need a distraction? Citizens could drop by a Relive shop to replay memories or stroll into a New You shop for instant laser surgery makeovers. And what if the urge was more primal? The Love shop was always open. No money changed hands in this world. Everything was free, which meant crime was almost non-existent, except for the one unforgivable sin, trying to live beyond your 30th birthday. The filmmakers even thought about the way people moved through their futuristic playground. Pedestrian traffic flowed on moving walkways, while maze cars, sleek bubble-like vehicles, shot through transparent tubes at incredible speed. At night, artificial light cycles created day and darkness, though clocks didn't exist. Time was measured only by the glowing life clocks embedded in every citizen's palm, their crystals changing color as the years slipped away. It was a world dripping with detail, but building it came at a price. The sets for Logan's Run were some of the most expensive MGM had attempted since the golden age of lavish musicals. The studio knew this film had to look like nothing audiences had ever seen, and the pressure to deliver nearly crushed the team. To save money, the filmmakers leaned heavily on the cutting-edge architecture of Texas. Dallas, Houston, and Fort Worth provided futuristic backdrops that looked ready-made for the 23rd century. The Dallas Market Center, a sprawling 4.8 million square foot complex, became one of the film's crown jewels. Its west atrium, 5 stories of terrace space wrapped in mirrored plexiglass, looked like it had been built for sci-fi cinema. The Great Hall, an arena big enough for thousands, became a showcase of modern design on screen. Other Texas landmarks were repurposed with similar ingenuity. The World Trade Center's glass-capped Hall of Nations served as a bustling hub. The Zales jewelry headquarters became Sandman HQ. A futuristic discotheque in Dallas doubled as the Love Shop, while Fort Worth's brand-new $5 million water gardens transformed into a hydrogalvanic power plant. Even the sleek Hyatt Regency in Houston was pulled into service, its futuristic interior slotting seamlessly into the film's vision. Still, MGM couldn't rely entirely on borrowed architecture. On their own sound stages, they constructed jaw-dropping sets. The carousel sequence, arguably the film's most iconic moment, was built from scratch, combining elaborate stagecraft, inventive set design, and practical effects. Hundreds of extras packed the stands, cheering as stunt performers were hoisted and flung about in a deadly ballet of lights and explosions. For days, the soundstage pulsed with energy as the crew filmed over and over, perfecting the chilling spectacle of ritualized death. The maze car tunnels required even more ambition. Two adjoining stages were literally merged into one giant space to house the full-scale tubes where those teardrop-shaped vehicles zipped along on electric power. Elsewhere, Stage 30 was converted into the icy caverns where Logan and Jessica nearly froze to death, while another stage held the decaying ruins of the U.S. Senate chambers, complete with Peter Ustinov and a few hundred live cats roaming through the overgrown remains. To keep the animals in line, the set was sealed off with double entrances so not a single cat could escape. Not every filming location was easy. To create the look of a massive undersea food harvesting complex, the production team moved into an abandoned sewage treatment plant in El Segundo, California. The stench was unbearable, and when the work was finally done, the cast and crew practically fled in relief. It was one of many reminders that building the future could be far messier than it looked on screen. Even the technology used to tell the story pushed boundaries. Michael York became the first film star in history to appear in a hologram. At San Francisco's multiplex laboratories, he was filmed for a sequence where his brain is fractured into 6 independent images, each one moving and speaking on its own. On screen, York became 7 people at once, a technical marvel for the 1970s. Producer Saul David even brought in holography expert Chris Outwater to help weave real laser techniques into the film. Looking back, it's easy to marvel at the visual fireworks, the award-winning effects, and the cult following the film inspired. But at the time of production, nothing was guaranteed. Every set built, every futuristic detail imagined, every gamble with untested technology carried risk. The weight of MGM's legacy hung over the crew, and the possibility of failure was always lurking in the background. Logan's Run was more than a movie. It was a test of how far Hollywood could push itself to create a fully realized future. And that's the irony. For a film about a world obsessed with staying young forever, the making of Logan's Run aged its creators overnight, from the soaring domes of Texas architecture to the suffocating stench of a sewage plant, from the glittering promise of Carousel to the quiet rebellion of Logan and Jessica. Every frame was earned the hard way. So the next time you watch Michael York running through futuristic arcades or Jenny Agutter gliding across the screen in her fragile, revealing costume, remember this. The film might look effortless, but behind the curtain, Logan's Run was a battle, one of the most challenging productions MGM had ever dared to attempt. But the struggles weren't just behind the camera. They started long before filming even began with the star of the movie himself. How Michael York had reservations about taking the role of Logan 5. When Logan's Run was gearing up for production, Michael York was the perfect age to play Logan 5. Though at 33 he had already outlived the very society he was about to portray. You'd think he would have jumped at the chance to star in such a groundbreaking sci-fi film, but the truth? York wanted nothing to do with it. He read the script once, frowned, and tossed it aside without a second thought. In his eyes, it wasn't worth his time. But fate doesn't let go that easily. At the time, York was in Los Angeles preparing for Christopher Fry's play Ring Around the Moon when the script landed in his lap. Director Michael Anderson, who had just worked with York on Conduct Unbecoming, was already attached to direct, which should have been incentive enough. Yet York's instincts screamed no. He flat out passed, convinced Logan's Run was a project better left unread. And then came the twist no one could have predicted. It wasn't a Hollywood agent or a studio executive who changed his mind. It was his driver. A younger actor tasked with chauffeuring York to and from the theater asked if he could flip through the discarded script. The next morning, he showed up practically wagging his finger, telling York he'd be a fool not to take it. According to York, the driver declared that the story pressed all his buttons, that it was the kind of project that could define an era. That unexpected burst of passion was enough to make York second-guess himself. Suddenly, the script he had so casually dismissed was worth another look. Reluctantly, York walked back into MGM, and just like that, he was Logan 5. The irony is staggering. A role he nearly rejected became one of the most iconic of his career. Logan's Run went on to earn $25 million at the box office, about $134 million in today's money, and even scooped up a Special Academy Award for its visual effects. The movie cemented itself in pop culture, starting a short-lived TV series and kicking off decades of chatter about sequels and remakes that never quite materialized. But success wasn't the only thing brewing on set. For all its groundbreaking visuals and futuristic flair, Logan's Run also carried its share of behind-the-scenes drama. The fight between Jenny Agutter and Farrah Fawcett, buried beneath all that sci-fi spectacle of Logan's Run, was a clash that almost turned real, an on-set fight between Jenny Agutter and Farrah Fawcett that went way beyond what the script ever called for. What was meant to be staged tension spiraled into a moment so raw, the director feared it could end in an all-out brawl. It all started with a catfight scene written between Agutter's Jessica and Fawcett's Holly. On paper, it was supposed to be a little chaos to add to the already tense atmosphere of the story. But once the cameras rolled, things got physical, too physical. The hair-pulling was intense, the movements unscripted, and the energy turned volatile. Michael Anderson, watching from behind the lens, realized this wasn't just acting anymore. The two actresses were yanking at each other with such force that he had to step in before the scene crossed into something dangerous. The fight, originally written to be longer and more drawn out, had to be cut short. Anderson quickly realized that if he let it go on, what started as a choreographed scuffle could spiral into a real fight between his stars. The tension was that thick, the physicality that aggressive. And here's the twist. Farrah's role wasn't some last-minute Hollywood invention. Her character, Holly 13, had roots in the original Logan's Run novel, though her fate was written very differently. In the book, Holly ends her life after witnessing the chaos that follows Doc's death. But in the film, she dies during a violent raid. Her storyline shifted for cinematic effect. Either way, her presence in the film became unforgettable, not only for her performance but also for that near-real fight that left even the crew uneasy. Away from the cameras, Farrah wasn't a stranger to tension with co-stars. She once revealed that during her early role in Myra Breckenridge, the set was so hostile, thanks to Raquel Welch and Mae West's feud, that she often hid in her dressing room, crying. The fight may have ended on set, but the unease it stirred lingered long after. Farrah's clashes weren't confined to Logan's Run. Her earlier battles on hostile sets proved she had already endured more than her share of behind-the-scenes drama. Yet if Farrah wrestled with tension, Jenny Agutter was facing a completely different kind of struggle. The real reason why Jenny Agutter really hated her costume. In the year before Star Wars would forever change science fiction, another film tried to do something bold, daring, and unforgettable. Logan's Run hit theaters in 1976, dazzling audiences with its glossy special effects and wild vision of humanity's future. But for all its spectacle, there was one detail that caught just as much attention: what the cast was, or more importantly, wasn't, wearing. This was no accident. Science fiction in the 1970s wasn't exactly known for subtlety. By then, Hollywood had embraced a subgenre critics like to call Shattered Earth, films set in bleak dystopian futures where society had collapsed or reinvented itself after disaster. Movies like The Omega Man, Soylent Green, THX 1138, and A Boy and His Dog painted grim pictures of humanity's fate. Logan's Run was one of the last films of that wave and arguably one of the most successful, even spawning a short-lived TV spin-off. But instead of cold, bulky spacesuits or impractical armor, Logan's Run went the opposite route. It stripped things down, way down. That's where Jenny Agutter's nightmare began. The man behind the wardrobe, Bill Thomas, wasn't just any designer. He was an Academy Award winner with more than 180 credits to his name, having worked on Spartacus and Babes in Toyland. His approach here was simple: lean into the fabrics and aesthetics of the 1970s. He wanted the future to feel sleek, sensual, and young, because in Logan's Run, no one lives past 30. But what looked good on paper and stylish on mannequins didn't always work in practice, especially for the actress at the center of it all. Let's start with the Sandmen, the futuristic police who hunt down runners, Their uniforms were bold in their simplicity, black, form-fitting with a single gray stripe across the chest. They stood out on screen, minimalist, menacing, and futuristic without going overboard. Compared to everyone else, they looked practical. But for the citizens of the domed city, the rules of dress were a whole different story. The everyday costumes looked like something ripped straight from a 1970s disco floor. Short skirts, wrap dresses, sheer tunics, and synthetic fabrics like lycra and spandex ruled the day. Sleeves were practically non-existent. Satin clung, cotton stretched, glitter sparkled, jewelry and wide belts topped it all off. It screamed California free spirit, even though much of the film was shot in Dallas, Texas. It was nice, yes, but also extremely revealing. And one detail was non-negotiable. Bras didn't exist in this imagined utopia. Most of these costumes weren't designed from scratch. The team raided retail shops, grabbing whatever looked trendy, then modified the pieces with geometric patches, sequins, or glitter to make them pop under studio lights. It was cheaper, easier, and stylish for the time. But as daring as the finished designs were, they were actually toned down. The original plan had been to make the costumes even skimpier, but the makeup costs for all that exposed skin would have ballooned the budget. Still, one outfit pushed the boundaries further than all the others, and Jenny Agutter was the unlucky one who had to wear it. Playing Jessica, Agutter was fitted into a costume that barely qualified as clothing. It was little more than a piece of fabric draped across her front and back, leaving her sides completely bare. The only thing holding it together was a thin chain that wrapped around her waist. That was it. No backup, no hidden layers, no support. It looked daring on screen, but off-screen, it was a constant disaster waiting to happen. Every movement risked a slip. Every scene meant worrying about how much would stay covered. Agutter later admitted just how much she despised that outfit. She described her experience on Logan's Run as fairly embarrassing, the kind of role that put her beauty on display more than her craft. She confessed that while she was glad to have been part of such an iconic film, the costume itself was a nightmare she never forgot. And you can understand why. For an actress trying to build a serious career, being forced to parade around in something held together by a single chain was humiliating. The film marketed it as stylish and liberating, but for Agutter, it was exposing in all the wrong ways. Instead of feeling empowered, she felt objectified. Instead of a statement of style, it became a daily struggle to keep everything in place while cameras rolled. That's the real reason Jenny Agutter hated her costume. It wasn't about the style or even about the outdated 1970s sensibility baked into the film. It was about the vulnerability it forced on her, the constant slips, the embarrassment, the feeling that her performance was being overshadowed by what she wasn't wearing. And yet, ironically, that very costume became part of Logan's Run's legacy. It stood out as one of the most talked about details of the film, even decades later. People still remember Jessica's daring look, even if Agutter herself wished she could forget it. So when audiences rewatch Logan's Run today, dazzled by its domed cities and wild effects, they see that iconic costume as a bold slice of 70s sci-fi style. But behind the scenes, Jenny Agutter saw something else entirely, a wardrobe nightmare she was never able to escape. Have you seen Logan's Run, and what do you think of Jenny Agutter's costume? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.